Thanks
Thanks for listening
to the
to the
Boots
Boots
podcast.
Hey everybody, the time has come. The Boots Off podcast is on its way back into our downloads. I'm finally at a place where I can afford the time and the focus to get back to booking and enjoying compelling conversations with military veterans about their experiences in the military, their journey to the civilian world, and what they're doing now or what their plans are for the future. Before I relaunch into a second season, if you will, of the show, I want to offer listeners a recap, because it's been a couple years. So this is a sort of best of season 1 in my opinion, and I've gone through nearly 10 hours of the available episodes and selected portions from each of them that I found to be the most insightful. Everyone has something to offer, and if you hear something in this season 1 recap that sparks your interest, I encourage you to find the full episode to hear more of what that person has to say. And as we pick this podcast back up, I ask that if you would like to be a guest on the podcast to share your own experiences and advice, email me at mike@lahr.media or fill out the contact form on www.lahr.media. Again, that's lahr, L-A-H-R.media. This next season, I have a stand-up comedian. I'll talk to a therapist about the very important subject of suicide, a Marine who decided to trade in his buzz cut for the Air Force life, and many more fellow veterans with good stories and helpful hearts. For now, let's revisit what happened last time we were together through 9 episodes, starting with episode 1, Kellen Carr.
Our recruiter actually called me, called me a unicorn. He was just like, here you are. He said, for our demographic, he was like, Southwest Missouri is 90%, white. It's, I don't even know what the percentages are in terms of people having college degrees, but it's not the most educated area, But he was like, you are a black male with a college degree coming in the Air Force. He's like, that's coming in enlisted. He was like, that's rare. Like, we just don't have that, And the biggest thing for me to go in enlisted, the biggest incentive was broadcasting. That's what my degree was in broadcast journalism in college. So I was actually going to get to go in, guaranteed job, and go into a career field that I had experience in, a career field that I actually wanted. So I thought at the very minimum, at least when I get out, I will have had 4 years of broadcasting under my belt, as opposed to the 3 years before that I was a college graduate, but I wasn't using my degree. So I joined. We had the tornado in 2011. I left 3 weeks later for basic training, and it was honestly it was a tough decision in that even in basic, my TI, he had made a comment to me. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Your recruiter screwed you over, man. You have a college degree. You shouldn't be here right now. Like you should be going to OTS. You need to be an officer." And at the time, like when you hear stuff like that, you start having some things, like some feelings. And even once I joined, I had supervisors and people that were over me that were younger than me, and obviously they joined sooner than I did, so that was one thing. But it was like they hadn't gone to college. So there were some things. There were some personal battles that I had with myself, because you're looking at it like, oh, I'm older than you and more educated than you. How can you be over me? But it was humbling, and it was honestly one of the best things for me. Not that I necessarily I needed it per se, but to some degree I did, To some degree I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about other people with that experience alone. Like I thought before that you would never be able to tell me there's somebody that's 4 years younger than me that I'm going to learn something from him. I'm like, you're the same age as my brother, I'm not going to learn anything from you, but I did. I had some people that were younger than me, and I learned a lot from them. And I realized like that mentality that I was going into it with, that's flawed, If you think that way, there's always something to learn from everyone. I had a unique position in that here I was in E3, E4, doing interviews with generals, 1, 2, 3-star generals, and regularly, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah, weekly, yeah.
weekly, right? So it got to a point where it was like, most people, you're talking to a 3-star general, you're like kind of clamming up, and that's the thing civilians will never understand about the military environment. Like that is a added pressure, just seeing some stars and bars on somebody's sleeve, and all of a sudden you perk up, and you get this a little anxiety even. But I was doing it so frequently that I got really lax, like to the point where I had these relationships with these individuals, and I could talk to them in a way that most A1Cs and senior airmen couldn't. That in itself was quite an experience. Obviously, Afghanistan was another experience. Being an airman and going in, I was in an Army unit. We're individual augmentees, so it's not like Army or Marines or something that we go there with a bunch of people that we know. We go there and we're just put in a unit and we don't know anybody. We're meeting a bunch of new people. But being in an Army environment, and when you go out on convoys to shoot stories and stuff, and a lot of the Army guys, they'd be like, "You got voluntold to do this, didn't you?" I'm like, "No, actually, I volunteered for this one," because the way we did it, my supervisor at the time when I was in Afghanistan, he'd tell us, "Hey, PA over here's calling us, PA over here's calling us. Like, where do you guys want to go?" He was very cool about that in terms of, he wasn't just going to be like, "Hey, this story's here in a bad area, you go." You know what I'm saying? He didn't want to do you like that. He wanted people to kind of volunteer for their areas and their tasks, and that was cool. I appreciated that. And he was also good about letting us seek them out ourselves. But yeah, there was a lot that, there was one that I did up in Kunduz province. It was the Northern Territory. It was the last Taliban stronghold. And it was one I was like, okay, this could be interesting because they had some action more recently, And not that I was going there like gung-ho, like, oh, I want to be in the middle of something, but it was more of a like, you know what, if I'm here, I might as well get this experience, whatever that is, And every day is different. No 2 days are the same there. So, but I went there and stayed on a cop kill a guy far north, and it was interesting, man. I mean, just live amongst the Army dudes, and it was cool because I definitely got their respect for doing that, out there for a week. But it was also just for myself, like it opened me up to so many things, and it changed my perspective in that these little things that I tend to stress about, here they are. These guys are out here living out here. They do this every day. They're not doing it for a week. And joining the Air Force was the best decision I made. I mean, literally, it for so many different reasons. It was a great decision. And what I tell people, getting out was the second best decision I made, because I got out, and like my 4 years, I love it. Like I don't have this. Don't get me wrong. There was bad moments in there. It's like with any job or anything. You're gonna have bad moments. There's some bad times in there, but overall, when I look back at that experience, man, my mind is blown. I did things that I never would have imagined doing. I saw places that I never would have imagined seeing. I worked with some people that I'll be friends with. I mean, like right now, like I'll be in contact with for the rest of my life. I made friends and connections that I'll have the rest of my life. I made bonds that are even stronger than bonds that I have with people that I've known my entire life, and I made them in a short period of time, and so it's amazing how that works. So if a person who's on the fence, I tell them, do it because you won't regret it. If you do regret it, people that do regret it are typically people, it's either the people around them, they just got a bad luck and they just were surrounded by not very good people, or you got to take a look inside at yourself and be like, wow, maybe my personality, maybe there's something that I need to change about myself because I'm creating this negative experience. That's the only people who are going to have truly bad experiences like the whole time. Unless you just get like, Cannon or something. I don't know, out in the middle of New Mexico. But overall, though, I the person that's thinking about it, like I said, my biggest regret, honestly, was not joining sooner. I wish I wouldn't have waited till I was 26. Had I not waited till I was 26, maybe I'd have stayed in longer. Maybe not. But I wish I would have joined sooner. And then the person who's thinking about getting out, don't don't stay in just because you can stay in and for 20 years and then you can retire. That's not a good enough incentive to stay in. If you're at the 8-year mark, you have 12 years left before you get out, right? Even if you're at the 10-year mark and 10 years left before you get out, some people are like, well, but I'll be 38 and I can retire. Yeah, that's fine and dandy. But who really stops working at 38? You know what I'm saying? Everybody you go work somewhere. Now it's nice to have that retirement on top of working somewhere else, but at the same time it's like if you're going to spend 10 years of your life, if you're thinking about getting out because you're miserable or you don't like your job or you don't, like your unit or whatever the case may be, if you're thinking about getting out, really think it over long and hard, but understand too, man, time is the most precious gift that we have. Our life, our time is the most precious gift we have. So if you're going to spend the next however many years, I don't care if it's even 3 years, if you go 17 years and you're miserable and you got to think 3 more years until I can retire, for me personally, my time is precious. So I don't care how long it is. I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna walk away. I'm gonna do something different because I don't want to have this regret of I spent this many years stressed out or hating this or not liking this or unhappy, and I wasted that many years of my life. So yeah, if you're on the fence about that, it's kind of the same thing. It's like it's here's the fence, man. Just you got to jump off the fence, pick a side, and just roll with it. Don't turn around. Don't look back. Just go. I honestly, man, I like to look at life like all of us. We're all authors, right? We're all writing a story right now. Every one of us. We're all writing a story. This is our book. Our book is called Life. And you got to write often and you got to edit well. And that's the thing. You choose how it's going to end. How it's going to end up. We pick the outcome. There are some things that are beyond our control. There are going to be things in there that are beyond our control. But for the most part, we choose the outcome, and whether it's a happy story or whether it's a sad or a bad story. And I think that's part of it, man. Don't waste your time. There are times where the military it can great for you. It can be a phenomenal tool and a nice stepping stone. And then, like you said, there's other people who they just fall in line and they can do 20 years and coast on the way out. But you have to figure out, I'm not gonna say early on, but you need to constantly be thinking about, can I handle this? Can I handle this lifestyle? If the things change, if I get married, if I have kids, will I have a good relationship? Will it, create a conducive environment that I want to live in, that I want to create? You have to think about those things. And that was the thing for me. I don't have any kids. I'm not married. But I did realize the longer I'm in active duty, the harder it's going to be for me to do those things.
From Kellen, we head out to sea aboard a famous carrier with Christian Garzone from episode 2. He knew you from a PBS documentary, like a docuseries called Carrier.
Yeah.
And so then I had to go and watch this. And you said that it actually does have quite a following, Carrier.
Yeah, it really does. It's kind of a global following. It still airs in repeats, and you can stream it. We were just talking about that before the phone call, kind of streaming. You can look at it online, and it can just kind of, you don't have to buy the DVD. You can just watch it on the internet, the World Wide Web. But yeah, over the years, when it first hit, obviously, there's a huge following. I mean, Mel Gibson produced this show of force, huge company, put it together. In 2008, when it first hit the TV airwaves, it really had a big following. People use that, I think, a lot of the times when they're curious about the Navy or curious about the military, what life is really going to be like, because it is so realistic and it is so true to what Navy life is really like, good and bad, and in between. So, yeah. When 9/11 happened, that was something that really touched a lot of people, and people reacted to it in different ways. But for me, it was something that really, really hit me deep down. And I thought, well, I'm young enough. I got to put up or shut up. I can't be. I just think that was a time where I said, I have to do something for this country. I can't just sit on my hands and talk about the war in Afghanistan and let's go get Al Qaeda, stuff like that. Let's get the Taliban. Let's get them. Go, and just be sitting here, a young American male who's 22 years old. I would look back on myself 20 years later and probably think, man, why didn't I do something? I think with that post 9/11 GI Bill, my transition to civilian life was eased a little bit because I didn't have to worry so much about, I'm just like, maybe if you watch a movie like Rambo or something. John Rambo's just wandering the streets like, we don't like drifters in this town, man. And he doesn't know where he's going or what he's doing. It wasn't like that. I felt like I had a purpose. Like I can go to school and kind of settle into things. I can find a part-time job and just kind of ease my way back into society. I know that sounds like a Rambo thing to say, but it wasn't like Rambo, you know.
And what kind of advice would you tell anybody who is considering enlisting, or if they're faced with an impending separation?
Well, if they're gonna enlist, first of all, I say do it because I think it's a great experience for any young man or woman to do. I think it builds tremendous character, and you're going to have life experiences that you're just not going to get anywhere else. And again, you go through some really rough patches. I mean, it's a lot of hard work. The military is not just some thing you sign up for, and it's just hey, here's a big GI Bill. No, it's a lot of work. So I say, if you want to think about enlisting, make sure you're physically qualified, then do it. Absolutely. Even if you get into a job field that might be, I don't want to say undesignated, but something that's less desirable or whatever, you can get your way out of that. You're proof of that. I'm proof of that. Mike Brogan is proof of that. You can still do a passion because really the military, there are equivalents. Every raider job in the military really is in the outside world for the most part. I think there's mailmen and everything else. There's librarians. I think too. Well, maybe not librarians, but at least bookkeepers, stuff like. I'm giving.
Well, we had librarians on the GS side.
Well, there you go. Yeah, but there's some kind of equivalent. So if you have a dream of being whatever, you can probably sign up with the military, get that job, and have some awesome resume bullets going forward in life. And maybe you want to stay in for 20 years and do your thing, because the military is just a wonderful experience. There'll be days, obviously, you're going to be there folding your arms thinking, this sucks. I'm so mad. But you're going to get through it.
That's going to be any job that you have.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
You're gonna have those days.
Absolutely, that you're going to have those days. In the military, I think, again, a lot of hard work, but it's so rewarding. The life experiences you're going to have, the friends you're going to make, the community you're going to have afterwards when you get out, you can't replace that. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Episode 3 held a lot of fun conversation to me, but in terms of what you need to know, Dom Panagalling has this golden nugget of advice.
Almost like what they say, like it's like the best kept secret as like a reservist loadmaster, because you get to fly on your own time. So you get to pick your schedule. Like active duty, you flew when they told you to fly. Like that, your name's on the board. Yeah. You don't decide, oh, you know what, can I fly on like Friday? And you just like, you're there. It has to be something like some circumstance like, oh, I got DNIF or something that can change everything. But other than that, active duty was pretty grueling as a flyer. But reservists, they cater to your schedule. Like that, if you can't fly on a certain time, it has to be like something crazy. But they never get to the point where they pressure people. It's a very like independent program. People take care of their own stuff. If you want to fly, you let them know when. You give them your schedule.
Joshua DeFore is a Marine turned filmmaker, and you need to check out his award-winning short film, The 11th Order, 6 Seconds to Live, which we discussed in episode 4.
There really wasn't an alternative to go to film school. You take out more student loans and try to transfer in? That doesn't work. It's a very specialized college at most universities, and But at the time when he had talked to me about joining, he had mentioned that Full Metal Jacket idea of being a combat correspondent, and I said, "You're just lying to me to get me to join. I don't believe you, man." But then 2 years later, it is a job, And the more I looked into it, I was lucky to have at my recruiting office a public affairs Marine, which is very rare to find in the recruiting field. And he told me, when you get in, first of all, make sure you sign the contract as a public affairs Marine. And when you get in and you go to your school, which is the Defense Information School, you want to be the best so you can test into broadcasting. That way you can work on video, and that way you'll be able to go and do film. And that was always my goal. Obviously, it adds 4 months onto your school, so I was, in school for like a year and a month. But through that process, I was able to become a broadcaster. So my goal was always to get to DINFOS, as they call it, and work my ass off so that I could get that opportunity to shoot video. I think I disappointed a lot of people by not doing anything military related, and I had done that on purpose. I didn't want to be pigeonholed. But I had a feeling for my last film, I was like, you know what? Not just for their sake, but for mine, I needed to do it therapeutically, just to kind of harken, like to go back to my military career and use this kind of those experiences, which are very unique to film students. And I didn't have the right story though. I was like, I don't know what to tell. I don't know what to really use. I had no idea. I know I kind of maybe wanted to make military films. Was on the fence about it. And one day, my roommate, who's a former Marine as well, former combat photographer, sent me this speech that John Kelly made in 2010 about Lance Corporal Harder and Corporal Yale. And you're reading this speech, it's incredibly moving. And it's the story of these two gentlemen that didn't know each other. You know, one is about to leave the post in a couple days. So he had been there for 7 months. And then the other Marine was just arriving to switch over. So they're put on this gate duty, having only met 10 minutes before. And then this truck comes barreling down the serpentine, and they have 6 seconds to make a decision. And they, with no hesitation, fire at this truck in those 6 seconds and stop it at the gate. They shoot the driver and stop it at the gate. The truck explodes. It kills them, but they saved 150 lives. So reading about that was just incredible. And it sounds like a short film just in that. Given the timeline and how much time was really spent in that event. And it was just an incredibly moving story about two, I wouldn't say ordinary Marines, but they were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. And yet it makes you think, well, what would I have done in that situation? Because there were Iraqi officers that ran for cover and they survived. And those two just stood there and did exactly what they were supposed to do. But even in doing so, I mean, it's such a big deal to make a sacrifice like that, knowing that more than likely you're not going to live. And I just incredibly moved by it. And then the fact that I didn't know this, unfortunately, but it's a really infamous story within the Marines, and it's even part of the crucible now, that you have to learn about them, which is kind of amazing. So they're forever enshrined in Marine lore, and it just, once I read that speech, I was like, I felt that it would be shameful to not make it because I knew I could, and no one had made a film about this story, which surprised me. And after putting the speech down, if I had walked away from that story, I would have felt not good about it because I would be not only limiting myself, but turning my back on something that should be made. And that's kind of how that came about. A lot of people that I've spoken to, a lot of vets, come out of service and compartmentalize that experience and are completely, there's two ways to go about it. They either compartmentalize it and are like, I'm a civilian now, I'm not going to talk about that, that isn't part of my life anymore, moving on. Or they do the opposite and they hold on to these memories and can't get over them, whether they be positive or negative. They miss the military and can't readjust to civilian life. Both are understandable. I was part of the compartmentalized group, and over the course of the last 2 years, I had seen some things in Afghanistan that I'd put deep below, and the more stress I put on at school, all of a sudden, things started coming out that were dormant apparently, and I kind of made myself sick and mentally, and had a nervous breakdown as recently as March, and finally was like, okay, enough's enough. I need to go to the VA. I need to get in that process of going to therapy, seeing a psychiatrist, talking about these things, being healthy, and trying to not only readjust as a civilian, but taking care of those military, not make it compartmentalized, bringing the back up and taking care of that. So I think my biggest advice is when you get out, take care of yourself and, make sure that you are adjusting, but also that you're doing it slowly and taking it one step at a time. Because if you take too much of a load, you're going to feel incredibly, overloaded with that stuff. And then off of that, don't settle. People respect military vets, and you'd be surprised. what you can accomplish, because maybe you have a decent bachelor's degree, or maybe you don't, but you're going to compete with the higher level people, because they're always going to pick a military veteran for the leadership, because you're responsible, because they can count on you. Most of these big businesses. So, if you want a salary job that pays a decent amount, get a degree for it, obviously, but you're going to have a leg up, and you need to take advantage of that.
The information that Will and Allison are about to give you is extremely valuable. If it's not for you, it could be for someone you know. So please keep an open mind and feel free to share this with others. Just like yoga and meditation, Reiki is clinically proven to work, and not at all in the way that fake doctors claim on infomercials about whatever products they're trying to sell. This is free, 100%. It's been researched and is shown to help heal physical injuries as well as depression and PTSD. In fact, Reiki for Vets has already partnered with VA clinics in South Carolina, and they're growing to work with others around the country. So keep an eye out for this practice. They may be coming to your area someday, and for no cost at all, just like this podcast. I'll let them tell you the rest. Enjoy. I started out, I had an Air Force veteran, I had a Navy veteran, a Marine veteran, and now I'm knocking out the Army and the Coast Guard.
There you go.
Perfect. Got them all
All
done.
in 5 episodes. That's how cool is that? I'm sure there are plenty of differences, we can't even get into them, between the Coast Guard life and Army life. What would you say?
I'll tell you what it is. The Coast Guard is the country club of the military, because when he tells me his basic training stories versus my basic training stories, there's no comparison. He had it cushy. I mean, they had it made. Really.
I will agree. It is a bit easier life. If anybody that asks me, what's the Coast Guard life like, and I honestly tell them that it's, if you go down to your local fire station, that's what most of the duty's like. If you're on shore, if you've got shore duty, you're there for a couple of days and then you're off for a couple of days. So it's actually a really nice routine. Now, shipboard life, that's completely different. When you're in port, you're working your butt off to get the ship underway. Once you're underway, you're working 24/7. It's kind of I say 24/7. You're standing your 4-hour watches, or your 4 and 4s, or whatever you do. But it's you work hard and you play hard. So
I would say that the Army is a little bit more like how they joke about issuing you your wife in the Army or whatever. They issue your wife, and if they didn't issue you one, you wouldn't have one. Well, it's more like they own you in that respect. Everything is about the Army. But in the Coast Guard, it's a little bit more like a real civilian type of job. It's more like a real job.
It's like a real job, plus it's like a family, because we're so small. So the number comparison, the number that always gets thrown out there that everybody kind of always thinks about, there's actually more people in a New York police department, actually working on the New York Police Department than there are in the Coast Guard. Coast Guard's typically around 39,000 to 40,000 strong active duty members. That's it, and that's worldwide. So. Yeah, we're very small. We're a very small group of individuals.
So it seems kind of like a little secret that all of those sailors don't know about.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to be out on ships.
Yeah.
If you're in the Navy, but Coast Guard might be where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's and my career in my field, I had a very interesting career in my field. My field typically spends a lot of time underway. As a machinery technician, really the bulk of it should be underway on a ship. I happen to 90% of my career, 99% of my career has been actually at shore. I spent one tour on a large boat, one tour on a small boat, a smaller cutter, and then the rest of it has been at shore. So because I also split my service, I spent 10 years of active duty, and at the 10-year mark, I decided we were going to start a family with our children. And I didn't want to be deployed on a ship and have that whole mess, because I've seen that all unravel from other, Coast Guard friends of mine. I decided I'm going to get into the reserves, and I spent a small amount of time in the reserves from 97 to 2001. And then in 2001, after 9/11, I was recalled back to active duty. So I'm a disabled veteran and have the disabled veteran rating and the whole bit, and really had a lot of severe lower back issues. and determined that I've got some, bulging discs and pinched nerves and so forth. So the VA being the VA, they're going to go through the whole course of action of medications and shots and all these different things because, frankly, they don't know what else to do. I mean, they said, well, I'm too young for surgery, and I really don't want to do surgery on you because, we just don't want to do that just yet at this point, as young as you are and healthy as you are. So I said, okay, that's fine. I'll just continue with the shots. Well, the shots weren't working, and finally they said, hey, you want to try this pain management clinic? And I thought, sure, what's pain management clinic? Well, they set me up for the appointment. You go through an orientation, and I don't understand why there's an orientation, but there's an orientation, a couple-hour orientation, and they introduce you to meditation, qigong, tai chi, acupuncture, and they introduce you to all these things as an alternative to or a complement to what you're currently getting from the VA. Can you just tackle the cat real quick? Sorry, you might have to edit that. So I was going through that, and I also at that point was starting my undergrad and I was working my way through my undergrad program and eventually into my master's program. And with the stress of that was increasing my back pain. Well, that was about the point that Allison started working with the Reiki. And for myself, I've always been in touch with my spiritual side, I guess you could say. Even as a child, I knew, in high school, our psychology teacher was great. He had us meditating in class, and so we had I had a lot of neat experiences as a teenager with that experience. But as an adult, I never really followed through with it. Well, as soon as Allison said, "Hey, I need a guinea pig to train on while I'm working with the Reiki," I said, "Sure, no problem." Well, like she said, I started feeling different, had better clarity when I was studying. I could feel the spiritual energy starting to kind of bubble up again, and acknowledging that. And I realized that I don't think I'm going to need to take the pain medicines that I'm taking because this is working differently. And eventually through letting my doctor know that I'm going to stop this pain medication, I'm going to stop the shots, this is actually working in its favor.
And as a caveat, we're not advocating that anyone stop taking any kind of medication.
No, not at all.
And Reiki works as a complement,
right,
not just an alternative to. And so you always want to talk to your physician about that. But it does complement regular medication, and it doesn't interfere with anybody who's receiving any kind of psychotherapy or any kind of medical intervention.
Right. So when we approached our local VA here in Charleston, this was, again, I think this was, divinely inspired because I was finishing up my master's, and one of my professors, his wife works for the VA. And I said, hey, we want to provide some volunteer service. I didn't tell him exactly what we wanted to do. I just said, hey, I want to provide some volunteer services. Who do I need to talk to? He put me in touch with the director of volunteer services. We crafted this huge email, like almost like a business plan. Here's what it is. Here's what we can do. All this, almost a full page of email information. And it wasn't but a couple hours later, he replied, and it was basically, yes, ! Call me. We were stunned. So we called him, and we want to set you up to come down and talk to our physicians. I'll put a group together because, honestly, we've been looking for this for the last 2 years, and we didn't know who in the community to talk to.
Wow.
So there we are. Here the door's just been breached. Now we're in, right? So we go down and we sit with, there's probably 6 or 8 physicians from the main hospital here in Charleston. And they're all kind of brainstorming how it could be used. And one of the physicians says, I know exactly where this needs to be used. This needs to be used in our inpatient clinic here in Charleston, it's on our 3rd floor. So the inpatient unit is it's a psychiatric ward for, I guess, short-term psychiatric patients.
6 to 9 days for vets who are suicidal or imbalanced, or they need inpatient for a little while to stabilize.
Yep, they either self-admit or they've been admitted by somebody, and they're there for 7 to 9 days. So we drafted up a protocol how we're going to work with these vets, and we scheduled up, and here's the days that we can come in and provide services for them. And so first day we go up there, and we didn't know exactly what to expect. We had a little bit of idea, but think of the way I think about it is just a big open room with a lot of chairs that are just bolted to the floors. So
even in a less than ideal scenario,
right.
These vets that we worked with for only 15 or 20 minutes, hands off, because
Yep.
that was the protocol, had some severely or impactful
experiences.
Yeah.
And even some of them even said, we would ask them, we always try to set a dialogue with them beforehand, just, get to know them a little bit, just a minute or so, your name and, how you doing, that kind of thing. And have you ever heard of Reiki before? And I can't give you a number, but a good majority of them, yeah, I've heard of Reiki before.
Oh.
Actually, we used Reiki in a program when I was in San Antonio with the Army, or when I was in Washington State, we used Reiki. So it's something that the DoD is using, or maybe some other of these, I guess, resiliency programs that they have. So they knew what Reiki was and they understood it, and they were like, "Hey, I'm okay with it. Please do." And some that didn't ever they've never heard of Reiki, we'd be done with our 15-minute session. They were like, "That's so relaxed. That's the most relaxed I've ever been."
Some actually felt, that they were almost out of body, that they didn't feel their feet or whatever. I mean, because they were that relaxed, and they were kind of surprised and overjoyed, and we were excited, and it was a hit.
People ask me, well, where do you see Reiki and all that? And, Allison says, we want to make it mainstream. And really that to me was a vision. I mean, I had a vision that Reiki needs to be mainstream. And when I framework that, I say, well, look at yoga. 20 years ago, yoga was done by, just a few select group of people. Now we're doing yoga with goats out in parks. So yes. I think we've maybe jumped the shark with yoga a bit, but I don't see Reiki going to that point, but it needs to be something that everybody just talks about and says, hey, you know what? I'm going to look at a Reiki session. Somebody doesn't go, oh, what the heck is Reiki? Oh, okay, cool. That's, good deal. Good for you. That kind of thing. So it's just another tool in your tool belt to help you through this, wonderful life that we have.
In episode 6, we checked in on a dear friend of mine, Wade T. Oberlin. He was a radio DJ at AFN Tokyo, Eagle 810, who went on to continue hosting radio shows in Everett, Washington, and now in Ohio, after separating from the Navy. Now, I love Wade. I appreciate his one-of-a-kind perspective and the personality that he brings to any of our conversations.
I had a resume that said, I've seen Damo Suzuki live, the lead singer of Can. I've also seen Kool and the Gang. I collect records all the time. I'm in the Navy. I've run social media. Let me just come in and do your stuff. And I ran into the manager at the time, an owner, and he really liked me and was kind of floored at my approach because it had a real audacity, I guess, which is, maybe it's a veteran thing. I think it is, because when you're a veteran, I think you might get out with, it's like, I've got all these skills, I've got all this know-how, and I've got power, drive. I've got my core values: honor, courage, commitment. People know that. And you could just sort of go into that and see if it works. And for me, it did. It worked for an entire, I think, year and a half. I worked for Jive Time Records when I first got to town. Yeah, I always knew that I'd leave the military, but there was a part of me that felt it was important to continue and re-enlist for the extra 2 years to go to Japan and experience Japan. And it's some of the best times of my life were held there. Not just as far as forming skills and a career path, but as far as immersing myself in culture. Like, I made many friends outside the gate, as Hisano would say. When I was there, I felt very, very close to people and to music more than I had since I had joined. And it felt very good. And I knew that I wanted to have that when I got out. It's a strange time. It was a strange time when I joined, too. Bush was on his way out. And I didn't know what war would look like. now in 2018, but it's been, just about 20 years of, wars that people really aren't resisting as much as they used to. Instead, I find that a lot of people are fighting for their own personal and individual rights and the rights of very divisive elements, be them like race or gender, things that are still important, but I feel like they've really eclipsed something that we should be addressing more, which is why we fight and why we go to war, and whether you feel you'd like to support something like that or not. And I think those are questions you should address for yourself before you join the military. For me, I felt good supporting my military for a time, and maybe I was naive, but maybe I thought that war would end and we'd come to something a bit more steady.
I found out as I hosted episode 7 that I just love talking to authors. Anyone that writes a book, I think that that's a great way to offer your perspective, and I definitely enjoy talking about these subjects with the people who wrote these books. So if you have a book in the veteran space, I want to read it, and we need to talk about it. Maury Castaneda wrote a 10-hut, 10 things veterans should know before they enter the civilian workforce, and I hear he may have something else in the works right now, so I hope to have him on again in the future.
When I was at E4, E5, I started getting my own C-pups, is what we would refer to them, right? So someone new, and they would follow you around, you tell them, you teach them, and do that. But yeah, absolutely. As I became an officer, and that's probably my favorite thing that being a Mustang was all about, was talking to young people and helping them reach whatever goal it was, whether it was to, do your 4 years and get out and, go to college. Well, let's figure out how we're going to save for money and what you're going to do. If it was to make a career, if it's to get commissioned, if it's to make E78, let me help you. And I think that was the most valuable. I still look back, I still get phone calls. I've been retired now for about a year and a half, or 2 years, probably closer to 2 years. And I still get phone calls. Man, you talk about warming the heart when I get someone that's, I'm like, hey, sir, how you doing? Like, first, don't call me sir. I'm doing great. How are you? Right? I'm out now, so it's cool. My name's Maury. But let me, yeah, how can I help you? And it's always nice that, sit there and say, well, maybe you should talk to, talk to your LPO, talk to your boss, or, or whatever. So yeah, totally mentor. And I started talking to these people about executive coaching and things like that. And as I started talking to them, I'm like, man, this is what I do. This is where I am. So I enrolled in an executive development program, an executive coaching program, and got my certification. And one of the things that the guy that talked about was that you need to write. You need to write to get your message out there and write about what you're good at. So I was like, I'm going to write about leadership. I've been exposed to tons of leaders, and as I'm writing this book on leadership, I'm trying to figure out what my actual philosophy is, because I realize it's just a little bit from this CO and a little bit from this chief and a little bit from that guy. What do I really stand for? And so I'm in the shower one day and I'm that's where I do most of my thinking. And I'm like, my next book I'm going to write is going to be about the transition process, because I was thinking about work and, why am I, the people that work for me don't see things a certain way, or why am I having trouble with this? And I address some of them in the book. It's like, I'm just going to write like, hey, dude, if I went back in the Navy, I'd be like, you wouldn't believe what's happening here. I say do this, and people are like, nah, I think we're going to do this. And then, I think it's better if we do it this way. Like, wait, aren't I in charge? Well, you are, but you're not really, and we'll get it done this week. Well, I want it done today. Well, why do we need to get it done today? Like, and then you don't really. So anyways, so I just need to write about that. I just need to get that out and let everybody know, like, warning, it's not as easy as you think. And so I came up with, like 12 or 13 little topics, and I started writing them down. And all of a sudden, like, this book's almost written.
Yeah.
I should write it. I should just get it down. My wife really encouraged me, and I have 12, 13 chapters, and then I started condensing and getting smarter about it. And in about 60 days, I had it. And the coach that I was using, the executive coach that was helping me through the process, he helped me through, the create space and the avenues for Amazon and things like that. And it was very, very simple. And so I would challenge anybody, if you have any aspirations to write a book, to hit me up.
What you say in the book is you realized you were trying to transfer into your civilian job.
Right.
And it wasn't working out. So what do you mean by that? And what had to change to make it successful?
Yeah, that was like a huge epiphany, right? You could probably tell from everything that I did. I took some advice from the people that were in charge, and then try to make it my own and form it. So when I was in the Navy, right, everywhere I'd go, I was like, where are the problems? Especially when I became an officer or a leader, it's like, where are our deficiencies? What do we do well? Who's great? Who's struggling? And then let's figure out how we're going to increase production. We're going to increase, what we're doing to make our team the best. I always, and again, coming from that school of sport, if you will, baseball or soccer, is like, hey, I just got put on this team and I'm going to make it better. But I'm going to make it better through helping these people get better. And one quote that I say repeatedly, and I used to try to do that, was put people in a position to be successful, right? Find out where their strengths are. And in the civilian sector, I really had to call Strength Finder. But I just didn't know. I thought I was a genius, but it's already out there. But seriously, put the people, if you're not good at that, get them off of there, put them in that area, and you have that flexibility. I don't know how many times, it was a few times where I would go and I would have a struggling E5 who didn't like doing this, wasn't good at that. It's like, well, can you do that? Yeah. And all of a sudden they start to flourish, they start to do things. So when I got to my civilian job, I look and I was like, well, what are we doing good? What are we doing bad? And it's like, okay, I got a grasp on it. Let's go ahead and fix those things. And there wasn't really a desire to like make that overnight change. Like, hey, the new guy's here, he wants to make that change. Like, well, that's a good idea. Maybe we'll start implementing some of that. It's like, well, I'm in charge. I kind of called the ball here. I kind of said we want to do that. And so I'm thinking in my mind, okay, you're not a lieutenant. You're not a lieutenant. You're not a lieutenant. Don't go off and say we're not doing this. Do not go off. But hey, how about we really try and do that? How about if you work on that? Okay, I'll get to it. What are you doing now? I mean, what's stopping you from doing that like today? Like, we can actually make some real good progress if you like decide that you want to get on board with me and do this today. And so, and I was very cognizant of not stepping on feelings. And I address it in the book too. It's like, I knew that there's some perceptions about me. I knew that people were probably waiting for me to yell or give a direction or, whatever else, or, he's going to go all military on me. Like, I think the subject, the top of the chapter is right. You're not a drill sergeant. So I think everybody was waiting for me to go off and, tell everybody to do things. So I knew that. I could feel it. I could sense it. And they were just waiting to tell me, or maybe I perceive that. Maybe I'm going off, and maybe if they listen to this podcast, I'm like, it really wasn't like that. But I just felt like it wasn't a setup, but like they were waiting for the military guy to come out. So I realized, I was like, I know you asked how was the transfer. It's like, I'm not going anywhere. They're right to an extent. I'm here as long as I want to be here. I can leave tomorrow, which that kind of opened up. Like, I can quit. Holy cow, I can quit. If it sucks that bad, I can quit. Now, does it suck that bad? Right? And so I used to have those conversations. Does it suck that bad? No, it doesn't. Okay. So let's calm down. Let's figure out we're going to stay here longer than 3.5 years. All right. So now if we expand this thing to like a 10-year thing, can you empathize with them a little bit? Yeah. Okay. So we need to go from there. So that's what I meant by transferring. You try and make an impact in the job you're at. You get this thing, you want to leave a mark. But like, hey, I can work here till I'm 70 if I really want to, I guess. Or until they, no one's going to ask me to leave. There's no retirement. There's no checkout. There's no transfer. There's no impending orders coming that says I'm going to leave. And my team isn't changing, so we got to figure this out. I find that the TAP class probably needs the same type of, and I could be wrong. I mean, this is just one person's opinion. And, who am I? I'm just some dude. But I've done enough research, and I do a lot of, talking with other individuals on LinkedIn. This is a very hot topic, the TAP class. I think it's a whole change. It's a whole change in structure. If you were to ask me, like, hey, what can we do? We take anywhere from, depending on the service, anywhere from 6 weeks to 12 weeks to integrate someone into the way we want them to be. Right. So Navy boot camp's 8 weeks. I'm not certain what Air Force is, but they're all between 8 and 12 weeks to teach you. This is how you wear your uniform. This is how you do that. And then on the way out, like, hey, we're gonna give you a week by someone that's works at our family service center or at the Fleet and Family Readiness or whatever acronym we want to give it, and they're going to give you 1 week to figure it all out, right? And ready, set, go. And we got these workshops, and it just seems kind of disingenuous in a way that, like, you gave 4 years, 5 years, and we took 2 of those months, 3 of those months to figure it out, but we're only going to give you 1 week on the way out. I think the title of your podcast is probably essentially what I would call it, a boots off, right? So you had boot camp, boots off. Well, I'm going for 30 days. You get orders to figure out how to do it. And I wouldn't, we do decompression from when guys come back to deployment. And I think it's probably some similar, it's a similar fashion where we have to just write a person off, a young lady or a young man. It's like, all right, you're out. All right, there's the point of no return. If you're going to boots off or whatever we want to call it, then you got orders to this place. You got orders to, and maybe they're local. They're not I know boot camp's only in certain areas, but maybe we have joint base type things where it's 30 days long, man. It's we're gonna cover this, we're gonna cover that, and the sailor or the airman, soldier, marine is actually gonna get paid their last couple checks while they're in there integrating to get ready so that we could send them out. Because I think, and this I don't know, I'd love some research if anybody's listening to do some research. I'd like to know how much we could reduce homelessness and the veteran problems by giving. I mean, we got guys with PTSD or don't know they have PTSD, guys and ladies that are out there, and they get 1 week to figure it out. I mean, they've got all kinds of issues. I mean, it takes you months to figure out the VA process, and that's a slow moving target as it is. And it's like, well, you'll figure it out when you get out there. And here, this is how you tie your tie though, and this is what your resume should look like. And you go to LinkedIn and type your name in and set up a password, and good luck. And it's like, well, yeah, if you have nothing wrong with you and you're sharp and you're paying attention and things are going swell for you, then that's probably okay. But I think that there's a lot of people that don't, and I think that that inability to actually get people to know I say it 4 or 5 times, and it's a phrase that I wish I didn't say. I need to come up with a different way to say it. So you don't know what you don't know, right? And so you're going to that TAP class to try and figure out what it is you don't know. And unfortunately, what you really want is to make sure that you're taken care of medically, right? Your health's probably your most important thing. So you want to listen to what the VA has to say. They come in for half a day, and you want to figure out how, if you're disabled, how to put in that claim and get it started as soon as possible. And so while you're working on that and you got your workbook, someone's in your ear about how to get a job, but you really don't care about that because you're trying to figure out what benefits you're entitled to, how you're going to take care of your family, and then hopefully when you come back up for air, someone's talking about how to apply for USA jobs or how to do something else. So you're missing stuff because it shouldn't be called tap. It should be called drink from a fire hose. And hopefully you figure it out. It's not to say they don't put out good info though. You just need to do it 2 or 3 times.
Revisiting episode 8 was a very emotional episode for me. And if it wasn't for the sake of time here, I would include the entire uncut conversation with Matt Rossi. Matt embarked on a hike through the entire Appalachian Trail to raise money under the charity Miles for Nolan. In December of 2018, Matt was killed in a car crash, and I'm grateful to have our conversation saved here and published to reflect on how good a person he was. And if you desire, I did write a post on how Matt had such an impact on my life. That post is on the LAR Media website under blog. Enjoy. Did you ever think that the next challenge was going to be the Appalachian Trail?
I absolutely did not. This kind of was a whim, And when I started terminal leave in November, you know, I had kind of told myself prior to starting terminal leave that I was going to take a year off and do nothing, and just kind of enjoy the freedom, and I did a little bit of nothing. But when February came, when I officially retired in 1 February, about second or third week in, I went, I don't know that I can sit around and do absolutely nothing. And so I felt like I needed to do something with a sense of purpose, considering that's all I'd done for the last 21 years. So yeah, I contacted a mutual friend of ours and asked if his sister-in-law would be welcome to the idea of me hiking the Appalachian Trail, on behalf of her son. Yeah, I mean, I guess, I've learned a lot about myself, like 21 years in the military. You go through a lot of adversity, and I've gone through quite a bit and experienced it, and experienced some of the, other airmen go through it. But this is a different type. This has been a real challenge that I didn't expect, and so I didn't think that I was going to have to persevere every day like I had to the first 6 weeks, and there's some days um, where they're pretty tough. Like yesterday was kind of a tough day, and so yeah, I've learned a lot about myself and what I'm still able to kind of go through and overcome. You know, Other things I've learned that aren't just about myself, or just how many how many people there are, in the world that know about the Appalachian Trail, that come to America, that get a visa and come to America just to hike the trail, just to push themselves, and it really is awesome to see, um, you know, the amount of people that come out here and try and push themselves to complete it, or even just do 20 um, 20 days, 30 days, doing only maybe 5-10 miles a day. It's really good to see, that not all Americans are couch potatoes, so and I mean, I guess the I've definitely learned that it's backpacking can be expensive. Long term backpacking can get really expensive. I definitely wasn't expecting to incur the amount of expenses I did, but that's just part of it. It's part of the adventure.
But is there anything else that you want to say? I'd like to get you out here to Arizona sometime so we can sit down and talk a bit more in depth. You don't have to hike out here. I would definitely advise against it. You can take a plane or a car.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to coming out there and doing a more long form podcast. Yeah, I think after this, my hiking boots will probably be hung up for just a little while, until I can at least gain feeling back into my feet. I haven't felt my feet probably in a couple weeks. Like there's portions of them that are sore, but like my toes and balls of my feet, they're numb. They've been numb for about, I don't know, 5 weeks now or so. Anyway, that's just again, that's just part of the adventure. But thanks again for having me on, and thanks for your support and helping me get the word out. I appreciate it.
This is something many people wouldn't can't see themselves doing, is hiking 2,200 miles through the mountains. But what is it that gets you through those days? What keeps you pushing forward?
Man, yeah, that's a great question. Some days it's me realizing that no matter how bad a day I'm having or how tough because of how tough the terrain is, or how steep the elevation is, it pales into comparison to young kids like Nolan who you know has much worse than I do. That any pains that I'm having in my legs and in my back, just don't compare. And like I said, any elevation changes or terrain difficulties, again, they pale in comparison to what him and others like uh, Nolan have to deal with on a day to day basis, and that's what keeps me going.
And finally, another conversation I was proud to record. For Father's Day, I invited my dad to be a guest as I spent my entire childhood as an Air Force brat and based all of my knowledge when I enlisted on experiences from his career.
Yeah, I had no idea, no concept of what military life was like. I didn't even know that until the first week of basic training, going through the lessons there. I didn't even know that I'd be wearing a uniform all the time. I
Oh,
thought a uniform was just for like special occasions and stuff like that.
surprise.
It's like, what? Yeah, what's this haircut thing going
You
on?
can
I
wear this every day. Yeah.
yeah, right. So yeah, it was that's how blind I was about what the Air Force was like or the
Wow.
military was like. But
Did you
luckily,
know
I
they were
chose.
going to yell at you?
No, I didn't know that either. That was that was quite a shock.
Were they pushing it though, like they do today? pushing education?
It didn't seem like it. I mean, you had you did have the GI, a form of the GI Bill, not like anything like it was later. You did have that as far as helping out financially, and of course they paid the tuition and stuff. But as far as pushing off hours education, it didn't seem like they did back then.
This is 1986, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 1986. I joined in 1985, so yeah, by the time I got to Tucson, it was nearly 86. And there was not a big, didn't seem to be a big emphasis on it. They came along a couple years after I had joined. I got my first duty station and was in personnel. They came along and they put personal computers in our offices. Now you have to remember this was like 1987, 88. Not They didn't put a personal computer on everybody's desk. We had one in our office. And that one in our office was one of maybe five in the whole personnel building.
Yeah.
um
They introduced this box, and
yeah,
then all the airmen gathered around like cavemen and
yeah,
were trying to figure out
exactly,
what this thing was. And
exactly.
you touched something and it powered on,
And we
freaked
saw
you
the
out.
we saw the golf game come on, and we're like, wow, yeah, that's great. We can play golf. um but yeah, there was like not any direction on what we were supposed to do with it or anything. So that a lot of times they not many people jumped on them, but I was one that kind of took to it. And I had my, like, for example, my job at the time was involved filling out a lot of forms with canned statements, repetitive forms, and just with the same basic statements again and again on each form. So I eventually I made a database of these canned statements, and I could easily, instead of typing these forms out on a typewriter, I could stick the form in the computer printer and choose which statements I needed to include on the form, and it would just zip it out. Now today, in our recent memory, that doesn't seem like a significant thing, but that wasn't, not everybody was doing that back then.
You just
With
came up with that idea,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you probably submitted that, and they gave you about 10 grand for that idea.
No, I didn't get anything. I didn't get anything
We
for
don't
it
have
except
any ideas, some incentive programs here.
the
You
only thing
just
I
did
got
something
for
to help yourself, and a good idea
exactly.
that could, make everything in the Air Force smoother. But
Well, it helped
they
me
just
make
said,
my
"Hey,
job.
good
It
job."
made my job easier. I could do a lot more in a lot shorter time.
That
And
seems like a genius thing to do, though, that people would want to know about.
well, I mean, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was genius. It was just a matter of using the tools that they provided in an advantageous way to for my own job. It's just thinking out of the box a little bit, really. But what it did do, they did start sending me to courses, formal courses, so I could learn more about databases and other programs and stuff like that. And it just kept growing.
So they did take notice that you were
That I
benefiting from this device,
Right, that I had
and
an interest. Yeah.
yeah, okay. So then they started sending you to places, and your career took more of a form.
The military, it, you can't undervalue or underestimate the
Support that they give you.
benefits, yeah, the support and the benefits of raising a family in the military. Of course, there's pros and cons on both, on the military and the civilian life, but I mean, the job security and the medical benefits and everything that comes with that military package makes it really good environment for raising a family and bringing up a family. It's hard to pull yourself away from that security if you don't have a good plan, for a good exit strategy, I should say. Like you did, and I really admire what you did when you made that move, because it was a very brave move. And but I knew that you and Devin had the skills necessary, that you would do well no matter what your choice was. But yeah, it's that's a tough decision to make.
What?
We had a comfortable life. We were living in interesting places, and I had good jobs, had interesting jobs. It's not like I hated my job. I had a huge stroke of luck with all my bosses. I mean, there were very few bosses that I had or supervisors that I had that I really didn't like. I mean, only maybe a couple. Outside of a couple of them, all the rest of them were just great people
Yeah.
to work with. I really didn't. There was no. I really didn't have a reason to get out.
You would hit 20 years active duty. You could have retired at that point, right? But
Hmm.
instead, you took 2 years to go to Belgium for another assignment. Was that just a fork in the road where you could have retired, but they offered you this, so you took it?
Yeah, it basically was. I mean, of course, I'd made that correlation about your graduation from high school and going into the military, especially when you had made that decision to go into the military and what you were going to do.
I didn't
Um,
make that decision completely by myself.
yeah, I understand. But when that decision was finally made, it became apparent. Okay, so the opportunity to retire became apparent, but I really didn't feel like I was ready to retire at that point. I didn't really have one way to put it. I didn't feel like I had my ducks in a row.
Mm.
I hadn't quite completed my degree yet. I wanted to make sure I had my bachelor's degree completed before I retired because I wasn't really worried about having that degree to be able to get the best job, in the world or anything, or to make a lot of money. I wanted that degree to give me the freedom to choose the type of job that I wanted instead of having to take the job that came to me. If you don't have uh, at that time it was looking like if you don't have a degree, you have like it is now, and it's even more apparent now. If you don't have a degree, your job choices are very, very limited.
Do you still see it that way now? Like, you think that degree really helped you that much when you put all of the experience on the resume?
Well, the thing with the degree is that as I think other people, somebody may have already mentioned on your show, your podcast, the degree is like a qualifier now. Most job positions that are advertised, it's not what that degree brings to the table for the employer. It's just a qualifier. It helps weed people out. It seems.
And then during that transition, was there anything that you learned that could have made it go smoother, or is there anything that you did that you think really helped it,
Well,
other than having a plan and that degree?
Well, yeah, the transition program, as you discussed in other podcasts, the transition program, as far professionally speaking, the the lessons learned in the transition program, as far as resume writing and stuff like that. I mean, now that I'm in this current position, I read resumes, and I interview people, and what they taught me in the transition program seemed like it put me a, a way ahead of a lot of other people. I read resumes now and I'm like, are you kidding me? What you submitted this? It's just like I don't know what they were thinking. They obviously had no clue or no training or preparation for that type of thing. And you'll get glanced over easily if you don't have a good resume.
You might not necessarily know the answer to this, but have you noticed, or even if you have veterans applying for the job, like, do they stand out? Is that something that you've been able to notice?
Yeah, they do because, and I've always, I was told this years ago, and I think it's still true that employers value um, the qualities that you learn in the military, that everyone learns in all branches of the military. Job loyalty, to see the job done, dedication to your job, and I'm not talking about to the level of being gung ho and all that stuff, but just the common quality of completing and being responsible and accountable enough to get your job done and do it correctly. I think is sought after by employers and puts prior military people head and shoulders above uh, a good majority of the rest of the other applicants in most cases.
That's all for the Boots Off podcast, the best of season 1. Music for the podcast is by Army veteran Chase Landon. He did record that back in 2004 or so when we were both in high school, but I've always enjoyed the song that he produced there by himself, and I appreciate him, absolutely appreciate him allowing me to use that for the show. Thanks to all the guests who volunteered their time to speak with me and trust me to share our conversations with the audience. Which leads me to my last, but certainly not least, point. I am extremely thankful for you caring enough to listen to me and anyone who comes on this Boots Off podcast. And I hope you get value out of it. If you do, please leave a 5-star rating and review on iTunes or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. If you don't get value, then you're probably not listening to me right now, so I just ask that if you don't go leaving me any negative reviews, that would be excellent. Of course, feel free to find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and share the podcast. Tell everyone. I'm always looking for new guests and new listeners. Of course, stay tuned for season 2 of the Boots Off podcast. We're back with new episodes next week.